Gold is moving again. Across the United States, high net worth investors are shifting their physical gold out of domestic vaults and into secure facilities overseas. This trend has been rising alongside one of the strongest climbs in gold prices in recent years. Gold has always gained attention during uncertain periods, but what stands out now is not the amount being bought. It is the growing focus on where that gold is stored. Investors are no longer thinking only about how much metal they own. They are thinking about the location that can best protect its long-term value. A part of this shift comes from how people view financial systems today. Some investors feel that holding gold through digital products, such as price tracking funds, is not enough. They prefer owning the metal directly, stored in a high-security vault outside the United States, where the bar is legally theirs without depending on a financial institution. A simple example is an investor who once held gold through a fund, then switched to a small bar kept in an overseas vault because it offers more direct control and fewer layers of risk. The increase in overseas gold storage is now seen as a signal. It shows how wealthy Americans are responding to long-term uncertainty and how they are choosing to protect their assets in a quiet but decisive way. If the value of gold is clear, the next question becomes the location that investors trust most. Why would that location be Singapore? The answer begins with something investors value even more than the metal itself. They look for a place where rules do not shift without warning and where long-term plans can be made without fear of sudden change. This is where Singapore stands out. Singapore has built a reputation for policy consistency that rarely wavers. Its economic rules are predictable, its legal structure is clear, and its regulations are applied in a way that investors can understand without confusion. For people moving significant assets across borders, this level of stability becomes a form of protection on its own. Another factor is Singapore's approach to property rights. Its system is designed to make ownership straightforward and secure, which is why many international storage facilities place so much confidence in operating there. The clarity of the rules means the assets stored inside those vaults remain firmly tied to the owner, even across long periods of time. High net worth investors often think in decades rather than years. They want a location that can hold value through 20 to 40-year periods without unexpected shifts. A simple way to understand this is to imagine a person planning to pass assets to future generations. They look for a place where the rules that protect those assets will remain steady for the entire duration. Singapore's stability offers that foundation. But policy consistency alone does not explain why investors trust it with their most valuable metal. There is a second factor they consider. It is the physical safety of the storage itself. This factor has become just as important as the value of the gold it protects. Singapore is home to some of the most advanced private vaults in the world, designed from the ground up to secure high-value assets. Facilities like the Reserve are built with reinforced structures that extend deep below the surface, using foundations made to support extreme weight without distortion. Their floors are engineered with load capacities far stronger than standard commercial buildings, which allows them to store large volumes of precious metals safely and without risk of structural failure. Security is layered long before anyone reaches the vault door. These facilities rely on controlled access systems, surveillance networks, and insurance standards that require the vault to withstand attempts to breach it for a set period of time. Many are built to meet a UL Class II rating, which means the structure must delay any forced entry long enough for a full response to arrive. This standard is recognized by global insurers for protecting gold in institutional settings. The vault interiors are designed with efficiency and retrieval in mind. Rows of metal storage units keep each bar locked and traceable, making the system both secure and practical for long-term storage. For wealthy investors, this level of protection matters because the value of what they store can be enormous. A single 400-ounce bar can cost more than the average car, which is why they prefer a facility designed specifically for assets of this scale. These physical safeguards help explain why investors trust Singapore with their most valuable metal. But security alone does not account for the full movement of wealth. There is a psychological element behind these decisions that also shapes where investors choose to store their gold. Many wealthy Americans are responding to something larger than security. They are preparing for uncertainty in the long-term direction of the United States economy. One concern is the rising level of national debt. As the total amount grows, investors pay closer attention to how future policy might shift in order to manage it. This creates questions about long-term stability, especially for people who hold large amounts of wealth that need protection across multiple decades. Another factor is interest rate volatility. Sharp movements in rates can influence borrowing costs, market confidence, and the value of assets tied to those rates. For high net worth individuals, the constant shifts make it harder to rely on a single financial environment and encourage them to distribute their assets across different locations. Monetary policy also plays a role. When the path of future decisions becomes difficult to predict, investors look for ways to reduce their exposure to potential changes. Some worry that prolonged uncertainty could affect the strength of the dollar many years from now, which is why they build strategies that do not depend on one currency alone. Wealthy investors usually act ahead of others. Their decisions are often early signals because they respond before the broader public notices the change. A simple example is a person who moves a portion of their gold overseas when the signs of long-term risk first appear, rather than waiting to see what happens later. These trends show why long-term uncertainty encourages investors to diversify their assets across borders. But this brings up a deeper question. If diversification is the goal, why do they prefer physical gold and avoid holding it through funds or similar products? They choose physical gold because past events revealed a weakness in digital holdings. When financial stress tested the system, the assets that depended on institutions showed their limits. During the crisis in 2008, several major organizations struggled to maintain stability. Investors watched as products tied to those institutions became harder to trust, even when the underlying assets were supposed to be safe. This experience shaped a long-lasting concern known as counterparty risk. It is the risk that the company holding or managing the investment cannot fulfill its obligations when pressure rises. Funds and similar products offer convenience, but they rely on the stability of a financial institution. If that institution experiences disruption, the investor cannot directly access the asset linked to that product. For wealthy individuals who think in long horizons, this layer of dependency becomes a point of caution. Physical gold avoids that problem. It is not a digital claim or a number stored in a system. It is a tangible bar that remains personal property regardless of financial conditions. A simple way to understand this is to picture a 400-ounce bar stored securely in a vault. Its value does not depend on a company or a fund. It exists on its own and cannot be frozen by a system failure. This is why many wealthy investors prefer physical gold over digital alternatives. It stands outside the financial structure and holds its value even when the system is under stress. And this shift reveals something larger. It is not just a series of individual choices. It reflects a broader movement in how wealth is being positioned for the future. These choices made by wealthy investors are often early signals of larger economic shifts. They respond before those shifts become visible to the general public, which is why their actions draw attention from analysts who study long-term trends. One emerging pattern is the gradual movement of assets from the United States toward financial hubs in Asia. This does not mean capital is abandoning the United States. It means a portion of long-term holdings is being diversified into regions that offer stability, predictable policy, and strong protections for stored wealth. Singapore has become one of the most trusted locations for this type of diversification. Its position in the global asset storage market has strengthened as more investors choose it for long-horizon planning. The country provides an environment where international wealth can be held securely while remaining insulated from short-term market changes. This has allowed Singapore to rise as a complementary hub rather than a replacement for established centers like New York or London. The shift does not signal a collapse of the United States economy. A more accurate interpretation is a gradual adjustment in how global wealth is distributed. As economies evolve, the influence of dominant currencies can shift slightly over long periods of time. Some investors view this as a natural part of a global system where no single currency maintains the same level of dominance forever. Their decisions reflect a belief that the dollar will remain strong, but may share space with other financial centers as the world becomes more interconnected. This movement of wealth is not about fear. It is about positioning assets in multiple places to prepare for a future that may look different from the past. And that leads to a deeper question. If wealthy investors are adjusting their strategies now, what does this shift mean for the financial future of the average American household? The choices made at the top of the wealth spectrum often highlight pressures that eventually reach everyday families, even if the impact appears in a different form. The movement of physical gold overseas shows a change in mindset. It is not driven by panic. It reflects a growing focus on protection and long-term stability. When investors spread their assets across multiple regions, they are choosing to strengthen their financial defenses rather than chase higher risk. A similar desire for stability is now emerging among American households as economic conditions continue to evolve. Families across the country have already felt the weight of rising living costs and shifting financial policies. Inflation has changed how people budget, save, and plan for the future. These daily adjustments mirror the environment that encouraged wealthy individuals to diversify long before these pressures became visible in everyday life. The scale is different, but the motivation is familiar. People want their money to hold value and last longer in a world that feels less predictable. The United States remains the center of global finance. Its markets and currency continue to play an essential role in the world economy. Yet even with that strength, the patterns of how wealth is protected are becoming more flexible. Capital is spreading into regions that offer additional layers of security, creating a global landscape where financial safety comes from diversification rather than dependence on a single location. For households paying attention to these changes, the takeaway is not fear. It is awareness. It suggests that preparing for shifting conditions is becoming a standard approach for many people, regardless of how much wealth they hold. And as the world continues to change, one idea grows more important. Capital always moves in the quietest ways, and its direction offers one of the clearest clues for understanding where the American economy is heading next.